So for this week on CyberSchool, we're kind of doing a rehash of one of the older versions of CyberSchool that we did that wasn't to the nice form factor and stylization that we have now. So I figured this was a good subject to go over, and we hadn't done this one in a while, and we've seen a pretty good uptick over the last year or so with our keypad intercoms, especially for the access control use case that we'll cover. And I figured it was a good time to kind of go through it, re-standardize it, just make it a little bit more formal and good. For today, we're going to be going over keypad intercoms and how to use them. We've got two main variations of our keypad intercoms. We've got the SIP H264 outdoor video intercom, pictured on the left, part number 011414, and the SIP outdoor intercom with keypad, part number 011214, pictured on the right there. We've got two main options for keypad intercoms. The RFID intercoms are very, very similar in functionality to what we'll be discussing today, but we're just talking keypads today. We're not throwing in the extra complication of the RFID units that we've already covered in depth. So why would you want to use a keypad intercom? Well, for one, it gives you the exact same functionality as a single button intercom, but you get more buttons. Everybody likes more buttons, so you get more stuff to do with it just because there's more buttons, which means more things to press, which means it can do more things with those buttons you press. So it gives you a lot of flexibility there, and there might be some use cases where a single button intercom isn't going to do enough. If you've got, say, a small little mom and pop shop, or even something like us at CyberData, where we've got, say, our delivery bay, a single button intercom is just fine. You press the button, it's going to call that predetermined number, and that can be the FedEx guy letting our main delivery guy know that there's a delivery there and he needs to go deal with it, or just like a regular small mom and pop business shop that isn't really taking customers inside of their facility now without an appointment. So whoever's got that appointment can just walk up and press that button and communicate with the people and get inside. But when you're dealing with, say, a doorway that's used by more than just visitors to a location, or maybe a multi-tenant facility, you need more buttons, because just having it call a single number might not be enough. And then it could also, in the use case of access control, that requires having like a secretary on hand to answer all the calls and buzz everybody in as they come in the morning. And that's, quite a lot of work for one person. Whereas with a keypad intercom, those people can just punch in their key code on the keypad and get in without having to communicate with anybody. So it kind of streamlines everything and makes everybody's lives a little bit easier, which is why the keypad intercoms are perfect for access control or multi-tenant buildings. Again, just because you've got those extra buttons. Those extra buttons allow individual time-sensitive access codes for all of the employees, or different dialing patterns for different situations in multi-tenant scenarios. So where would you use these things? Of course, the main use for intercoms is going to be for a front entrance. Specifically talking about our access control use case here, where it would be located at the front entrance, and you've got your keypad, which would be used for key codes, and those time-sensitive key codes that you can issue to all of your individual employees. So everybody's got their own key code, and they can come in at different times. I can come in Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and my boss can come in at all the time. So it gives them that little bit of flexibility there. But then for your regular visitors, your patrons, or even just your regular UPS guy, they got a regular call button that they can interact with and go through that standard process that one would expect with an intercom, where you press a button and you talk to somebody, and if they want, they can buzz you in. So you still get all that same functionality out of a keypad intercom. And a similar thing works for employee parking lots, where instead of the onboard relay of the intercom itself actuating that door strike to get access through a door, that onboard relay is actuating a gate, so the gate opens. So that way you can pull up and park your car. So you get that same kind of functionality out of it, just in a slightly different use case. And again, you've still got that big call button on there. So if you got a new employee and they don't have their key code yet, they can go that way. Or if you've got, the UPS guy and he can't get in through the other way, or, you've got some weird visitor that's, hey, I want to know what's going on here. And the security guard can tell them, go away, this is a government facility, you don't belong here. So you've got all that same functionality that you get out of a standard intercom, but with more buttons. The multi-tenant buildings, it's very useful to have a keypad there because it gives you that option for either the speed dialing capability, where each individual button of that keypad can actually dial it directly a number. So you press 1 for one number, you press 2 for a different number, so on and so forth. Or you could have a directory posted right next to it. So say this is a multi-tenant facility with more than 13 buttons. Say you've got 14 people in this particular building, or maybe even 20, where there's not enough buttons for speed dial capability. So that way you would have a directory right next to the intercom, and they could dial the extensions of that particular location that they want to go visit. So say, it's a particular law office, or it could be a multi-tenant business building where they've got, a notary, a doctor's office, podiatrist, nutritionist, what have you. It's one of those big multi-tenant buildings. I've got an intercom outside, so that way you can call wherever you're trying to go, check in for your appointment, and they can let you up, since they might not have a waiting room open for people to go and wait in. But these could also be used in the foyer or an entranceway of a building. So, there might be places where you've got maybe a little bit fancier law office, where it could be, a law office that's shared by multiple different lawyers, and they've got this nice foyer or entranceway that people can come into and kind of wait there, sit on a little bench, and you can interact with an intercom, maybe a video intercom, so that way the lawyers who are receiving the call can let the people up when it's their particular time for an appointment. So how would you go and actually use these intercoms? And we've really got two main use cases for the keypad intercoms. You can use them in the access control use case or the multi-tenant use case. We find that the access control use case is the most predominant way that people will use our keypad intercoms, but we do have some that do opt for the multi-tenant option, which is still very, very powerful. And when you've got the unit set for the access control use case, you're going to use the dial mode that we call security mode. And security mode basically allows that the keypad is used for key code entry. So all of your employees, like myself, I can come into the business in the morning, punch in my key code, and get in through the doorway when the key code is entered and it's in the appropriate time and the particular day of the week that onboard relay can actuate, or the attached dual door strike relay that's connected to the intercom over the network can actuate and open the door. Whereas those standard visitors, patrons, and what have you can just walk up and press that regular front call button and communicate with somebody. Maybe it could be a secretary, it could be a security guard, and if that person is allowed access to the building, they can get buzzed in, and the onboard relay or that networked dual door strike relay can actuate based on that DTMF code. So that's one of the main use cases that we encounter with our keypad intercoms. But another really good use case is our multi-tenant use case, and you've got a little bit more flexibility in terms of a dial mode when you've got the unit set, or when you're going to use it in a multi-tenant facility. And there's two main variations of it. Technically three, but in practice it's really two. You've got the speed dial mode, where each individual button, all the 12 on the keypad itself, and then the one big front call button, dial a particular number when they're pressed. And that can be, when you actually press these buttons, there can be a delay where you have to press and hold the button for, say, 2 seconds like default. You can set it to 0, so as soon as one of those buttons are pressed, or if for some reason you want to make people hold the button for 10 seconds before it makes a call, you can do that with the speed dial mode operation. And that we find when more people are doing the multi-tenant setup, they end up going for the speed dial mode because it protects against toll fraud. And that's one of the things that, unfortunately, depending on how the keypad intercom is set up on the phone system, you open up the possibility for that when you're using either the telephone mode or cell phone mode dialing pattern. And those two function just exactly the way that you would expect it. So in telephone mode, it works kind of like an old school telephone. It might be, a little hard for some millennials or Gen Zers that might be watching this to really understand this. But with a telephone back in the old days, you had to pick up the phone and listen for a dial tone, and then you would dial the number of the person you wanted to call. And when you were done, the phone would just call on its own. You didn't have to press like a send button or anything. It would just do it. Whereas with a cell phone, I know all my millennials and my Gen Zers out there know this. You press on your phone, you press the phone app, and then you dial the number you want to call, and then you press call. So you've got two different options in terms of setting up your keypad intercom when you want to go for this kind of actual dialing mode. And a reason that you would want to do this is you've got a multi-tenant facility that has more than 13 people, because of course if you're using the speed dial mode, you've only got 13 buttons to interact with. You can only set a speed dial for 13 different users. Whereas if you've got, say, 14 people, you can't really do anything with speed dial mode unless you've got somebody, one of the other law offices, or say somebody is nice enough to, forward the call over to, person number 14. So in situations like that, you would want to use either telephone mode or cell phone mode to actually go and allow people or visitors, patrons, what have you, to actually dial the numbers of the people that they're trying to reach for their particular appointment or their engagement. But with that, the capability to actually dial a number, depending on how the individual extension is set up for that keypad intercom, it could potentially allow for toll fraud, where you intend people only be able to come up and say dial the 3-digit extensions that you have, or the 4-digit extensions for the different rooms or the businesses that they'd be interacting with. Well, depending on how that's set up, the intercom's not going to be smart enough to know, okay, I'm only allowed 4 digits for a number to call. And if somebody tries to say punch in their cell phone number, they could do that and potentially, depending on how the unit is set up on the phone system, actually make a call across, the regular PSTN network to your cell phone. So that way, they could realize that and say, hey, I'm going to hijack this intercom and start making collect calls to my family over in Manila and really run up your phone bill. So that's just a thing to consider when you're setting up one of these units for either telephone mode or cell phone mode. You really want to limit the capability of the intercom so people can't go and hijack your phone system and use it to make collect calls or long distance calls. So let's talk a bit more about setting up the different dial modes, and we'll first talk about speed dial mode. So as I discussed, with speed dial mode, each individual keypad button can dial a different number. As you'll see here in our illustration, we've got our left column of our different keypad options, keypad 1 through keypad pound, and then the call button finally. Each of them are set to dial a predetermined number, starting with keypad 1 dials 1000, keypad 2 dials 1001, so on and so forth. And in this particular example, as we can see in our second column there for the ID column, keypad 1 will call the first floor office number 1, so on and so forth until we get to keypad 7, and that's where there is a second floor for this imaginary office building that I created. So they're split. The first numbers 1 through 6 dial the first 4 offices, and the 7 through pound dial the second floor offices. And then finally, for the call button, if you're not sure where you're trying to go, you press the call button and it dials 411, which is just the building assistance. That could be a security guard, secretary, what have you. I didn't really come up with that much stuff on who's actually answering the phones. It's not particularly important, but it gives you an idea of how you can go and actually set up the different speed dial options. And based on the speed dial timeout that we have set there, each button will need to be pressed and held for 2 seconds. So that way the intercom will actually go and generate a call. And the reason that you might want to have either 1 or 2 seconds depressed time for the intercom to actually take action is to prevent that kind of false calls from somebody just, briefly depressing a button. I know as an angsty teenager and even as a child, if there was big lit up buttons on a wall, I would go up and press one of those. And, if my parents weren't around to stop me, I might, inadvertently make calls to a particular law office that might be, in the middle of a, potentially heated family law office problem. So it's sometimes good, depending on the use case and who's actually going to be receiving the calls, to maybe have a timeout on there. So if a kid comes up and just mashes a whole bunch of buttons, it doesn't inadvertently make calls to people that might not be expecting them or might not want them. And it gives you that possibility to just go and set how long you want to set that. But the nice thing with speed dial mode, in comparison to the other two modes that we'll discuss, telephone mode and cell phone mode, it completely removes the possibility for toll fraud, because each individual button dials a particular number. So that way there's no problem of somebody, say, hijacking it and making calls to their family over in the Philippines or over in Japan or China or what have you. Nobody's going to be calling and making long distance calls on your behalf. But one of the downsides to using both speed dial mode mode or cell phone mode or telephone mode that we'll discuss a little bit later, is you need to kind of have a directory right next to wherever the intercom is, because your regular person that's, say, coming up for their first time to go to a podiatrist, they're trying to go see their foot doctor, they got some plantar fasciitis, their feet hurt, they're trying to get insoles made, they've never been to this doctor office before, they're kind of frustrated, and they walk up and they see the intercom, but they don't know which button is for their podiatrist. So they're having to sit there, they kind of look around, okay, they're looking at all the different doors, and they're trying to figure it out. They're frustrated. But if there was a directory right there with it, and they saw that, okay, I'm trying to go to, Shields' doctor's office, the podiatrist, they could just press number 1 and be able to go to that particular user. So if you're going to be setting up one of our units for a multi-tenant use case, either the speed dial mode or the cell phone mode or telephone mode, a directory is a really good idea just to have right there next to it. So that way visitors or first-time patrons that are coming and going to be using the intercom know what button 1 does and know what button 2 does, and so on and so forth. It's just that nice little thing that'll really help out the actual users of the unit. Not required, but would be really, really helpful for the people that actually have to interact with the intercom after it's in place. So next, we've, of course, got cell phone mode and telephone mode. And it functions much like a desk phone, but basically with a different procedure. And it allows users to dial the numbers directly. There's really not too much setup when you pick one of these. You just change the dial mode radio button, as you'll see here in our image. It can be either cell phone mode or telephone mode. And again, they've got a slightly different procedure, but a different outcome. You basically, with telephone mode, you press the front call button, you get a dial tone, and you dial the number, and then the intercom makes the call. Whereas with cell phone mode, you dial the number you want to call, and then you press the front call button to call that number. One of the downsides of this, of course, is the toll fraud that we've been discussing at length here. Just because a user has the capability to dial directly a number on there, if the unit's not set up with restricted capabilities to, say, only make internal calls, it does open up that possibility for toll fraud, because if somebody can make a call internally and they're allowed to make, say, a call to their cell phone, just to run a test, then they could come back later and hijack a call and make some calls and run up a long distance bill on your phone system. So you really don't want to do that. You really want to be careful if you're going to be using either the cell phone mode or telephone mode operation. But again, just like with the speed dial operation, you're going to want a directory of numbers right next to the unit, so that way people know, because when they walk up, it could be even more confusing than it being in speed dial mode. If they actually have to dial the numbers themselves, it makes it even more important that a directory number is there. So that way they can just go and look through, I'm trying to go to the podiatrist, that's extension 123, and they punch in 123 and interact with the unit. So it just gives you a good idea on how to interact with this. This is a very, very basic implementation in a dial mode of it, but do use caution if you're going to be opting for either of these two modes. Next, we get to security mode, which is what I think is the big selling point for one of our keypad intercoms, because it gives that time-sensitive key code capability that you just don't get with other intercoms, especially single-button intercoms. But it gives you that full access control capability out of a unit while still having that intercom for visitors. So when you're using a security code, basically there's a time-sensitive capability on it, as you can see here in the image that I have, where our example Jason's code 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is valid from and to all the time. So Jason can come in anytime. Where me, Paul, number 2, my code is 14731. I'm only allowed to come in between 7 and 5. I've got a real restricted workday. I can only come in on weekdays. 7 through 5 p.m. So you can really go and restrict what times people are in. And whereas line number 4, Laurel, with her code 463821, is only allowed in on the weekends between 5 a.m. and 8 p.m. So Laurel's got a little bit more flexibility, but she's one of our weekend workers, so she can only come in on the weekends. So you got that real flexibility that you can actually go and enter with the time capability on here, and really restrict users to only be able to come in certain times as desired. And of course, all these codes are going to be entered on the keypad itself. And one of the nice reasons for this is it just allows easy access for all those employees. So if you've got one of these for a building entrance right outside of an employee parking lot, if it was just a single button intercom and, say you don't issue keys to all of your individual employees, they're going to have to go and press that button and talk to, either security, and everybody's going to have to get buzzed in. So it makes a lot of work. It really front loads work for that particular person that's answering those calls. Say if you've got a secretary that's doing that from, probably 7:30 to 8:30, they're just sitting there buzzing people in the entire time. And that really, you might not have intended to hire a secretary to just buzz people in. So having that capability for all of those individual employees as they're coming into work, they're trying to get ready, they're getting in there a little early so they can finish their coffee, use the bathroom, and get ready to work right at 8 o'clock. It gives them that capability to just walk in and punch in their key code and be on their merry way without having to interact or potentially distract that secretary. Or in the chances where, the person that would be answering the call from that single button intercom is not there, then all those people are locked out in the parking lot. If you've got a keypad intercom, they can just punch in their code and be on their merry way. But the nice thing with a keypad intercom is it also allows all those visitors or people that might not have that key code or for some reason forgot their key code to just press that call button and still go through the standard process that you would expect with an intercom, where they can communicate. If it's one of our video options, they can actually see the person there at the intercom. And if they want to, they can buzz the person in or say, no, we fired you on Friday. You're not supposed to be here. You're not coming back in. So it gives you a lot of capability through that security mode option. So, of course, talking about all these different security codes, how the heck do you make one of these things? Well, to make one, you just click on one of the instances in the big table of 500 different users of a particular security code, and you just click the edit button. And once you go through there, you get a nice little pop-up that helps you configure the security code for that given number in the particular table. So, of course, you'll want to set a particular name of the user. It could be just, first name, could be first and last initial, what have you. It's your intercom. You name the people as you want to name them. The important bits in here are the code and then the valid from and valid to times. So the codes, of course, must be unique. I can't have code 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and somebody else couldn't have that same code, because then how does the intercom know which code is whose code? So all the codes must be unique. And for that, those codes can either be anywhere between 1 to 8 digits, 1 being extremely insecure. I don't think I'd want a keypad intercom system where I could just walk up, press 1, and I get buzzed in. I'd probably want at least 4 or 5 digits on there, probably 8, just because I'm kind of a security nut. You should see how long my passwords are. But typically, the more digits, the better, just because it's more potential variation and more randomness that you could have in there. And then you need to set your valid to and your valid from time. And these can either be set with weekday, weekend, all, or individual days. So say, for example, you've got users that only come in on, say they're an intern and they only come in on Friday afternoon. They're working on a particular project for one of their school courses. You just issue them a code that's only valid between, say, noon on Friday through 6 p.m. on Friday. They're college students. They're not going to be staying too long anyway. So you can go and set those valid to and valid from times. And those are the codes within, if that code is entered, it will open the door. Whereas if it's entered outside of that valid from or valid to time, where the code would then be invalid, the door just doesn't open. So it really lets you control when those codes will work. And that's where you get that time sensitiveness of those particular codes. But after going and creating all those codes and issuing them to your different employees, there might come a chance where you need to, say, invalidate a code or remove a code. Say, for example, you fire somebody. There's really 2 options you could go if you're using one of our keypad intercoms and somebody gets let go. You can either just delete the user and the code won't work, and that's well and good. It's basically like taking away their key. They can no longer get in the building. Done is done. But it might also be good, say, if that employee was a little disgruntled when they left, or they had, kind of a history of maybe flying off the handle, maybe, coming down to a certain area and just yelling at different employees over the cubicles. You might want to maybe blacklist that user instead, so that way when a particular code was entered, and you could take different actions on that. And that's what you get with our blacklist feature. So if a code is blacklisted, of course the code won't work, even if it's in that valid from or valid to time. Once it's blacklisted, it basically invalidates the code, where it just will not work. But the intercom can take one of 2 different actions when that blacklisted code is entered. It can either kind of do the discrete option and make a call to a predetermined number and play a local audio file. So it can say, blacklisted code entered at employee parking lot intercom number 1, and, your security guards can get dispatched out there. Or it can do the less discreet option of sending out a big multicast message. And that could go through all of your fancy CyberData IP66 horns you got out there in the parking lot for emergency notification. So that way everybody in the parking lot knows that somebody just entered a blacklisted code. So that guy that was berating people on Friday after he got his pink slip, he got let go, and he, went through the office and gave everybody his peace of mind, a peace of mind after, he left that day and he got fired. Well, everybody would know that that guy came back in on Monday morning and tried to enter that blacklisted code. So the blacklist code is a really, really powerful feature when you're dealing with any kind of access control system. You can always delete a user and their code won't work, which is great, but sometimes it's good to know that they tried to use their code, and then you can take actions based on that. Maybe getting law enforcement involved. It kind of depends on the severity of the scenario. So, of course, when you're dealing with an access control system, a really important part of any access control system is the access control log. So with our access control systems, with our intercoms, we kind of sell them as a single box unit, whereas a lot more of the other access control systems, from any of our big competitors or any of the major access control systems you'll see at big enterprise locations come with card readers and then an individual server or keypad entry and an individual server to basically control all those. You spend a whole bunch of money on your server, and then you've got cheap little keypads or RFID tag readers that you can put out at every door, and everything kind of wires back. Well, we've got a different design philosophy with ours, where we're targeting more of the small to medium business, so everything is done on box with our units. So you buy the keypad and intercom, you don't need an additional server to log everything or anything like that. All of the logging would be done on box. So on one of the tabs that you'll actually have on the web interface of our keypad intercoms is the access log. And in the access log pictured here, it shows different events of when the key codes are entered. And of course, it's going to show either a good code and whose code that was when it was entered, or an invalid code, and gives you basically different steps when these codes are entered. So for example, if we look at lines 19 through 22 on our event log there, we can see at line number 19, Cameron's code was entered and it was a valid code. Then that user was authenticated, meaning that, okay, the code was entered and it's a valid code, and it's also a user that's allowed to come in through this particular time. So then it lists the actions that the intercom takes. We can see in line 21 that the relay was activated, which means the door strike that the relay was connected to clicked, the door is unlocked, and Cameron went on his merry way. And then a couple seconds later, in line 22, we see that the relay deactivated. The door strike that the relay was attached to is now back in its locked and energized state. So that way, now that door returned to its locked state. So each successful entry, just like in this example here of Cameron using his code, is going to take up 4 lines in that access log. And our access log can contain up to about 10,000 entries, about 25,000 successful entries or complete operations, where it goes through the valid code, user authenticated, relay activated, and relay deactivated. So basically, you've got about 25,000 good entries on there, which should be, depending on the number of codes you're using, could be, months at length, or, it could be, a week or two, depending on how many codes you have used and how many people are going through that particular door. And an important part when you're dealing with an access control system is being able to retain those logs before they roll over and start erasing data. So our intercoms have the capability to actually export the log in a standard CSV file. So that way, every instance, every week, the IT manager can just go through all their different intercoms, log in, go to the access log page, and just hit that download button. And the intercom will prepare that CSV file and download it to wherever your browser would like that particular file to be downloaded to. So it gives you that capability to back up all these different logs, which can be really important if, in the event there's a theft or anything going on, you can be able to track and trace through and see exactly what time that code was used, and you can kind of sync that up with other cameras for your video system that you might have in that particular area. So it makes it a really, really powerful feature that is just, part and parcel with any kind of access control system. So at the end of the day, are keypad intercoms right for me in my scenario? Well, it kind of depends on your particular use case. If you're going to be using an access control use case or a multi-tenant use case, you've got a whole bunch of different dial modes that you can play from: telephone mode, cell phone mode, speed dial mode, and security mode. The most practical that I think we have a lot of customers that end up using, of course, is security mode. That's the end-all be-all that most people are using. And I'd say speed dial is probably a close second, with cell phone mode and telephone mode kind of lagging far behind, just because of the potential problems that you have with those style of operations. Users can dial a number, so if you don't set it up right, they can dial any number. So that way they can start making calls on your dime. But another good thing for the keypad intercoms is they're perfect for main entranceways that could be shared by employees or visitors. So they make it ideal for those scenarios like we were discussing, where you've got your big employee parking lot, or maybe there's no dedicated employee parking lot. It's a parking lot that gets used by visitors, potential applicants for new job roles, regular employees, your visitors, and then even patrons that might be coming over. So it gives that perfect option for that access control, allowing all your regular employees to just punch in their key code and be on their merry way, while still having that intercom functionality that visitors might expect at a particular location. And because of the different dial mode options, it makes keypad intercoms absolutely ideal for multi-tenant offices or office buildings, because you've got that capability to have a preset dial plan with our speed dial option, or the actual dialing capability with telephone mode or cell phone mode to go and reach all of the individual businesses or offices in a particular building. So it makes it really, really powerful for basically any place where you need to do something more than just call a single number. But the one kind of downside to these keypad intercoms is the dial plan capability can really open up an option for toll fraud, depending on how the unit is configured. Just because you're giving the users to the capability to actually dial a number, and if it's somebody smart and they know what they're doing, it makes it really, really easy to go in there and use different call injection techniques or different ways to actually take over that intercom and start making collect calls on your dime to wherever in the world. That's how a lot of those different spam callers are working, where you get calls about your auto warranty is expired and all that good stuff. So you really want to be careful when you're setting up anything that gives the open public the capability to actually dial anything, because if you set it up improperly, you invite the capability for toll fraud.
Thank you for watching this edition of CyberSchool. If you have any questions, please get in contact with our sales department. They are available by email at sales@cyberdata.net or by phone at 831-373-2601 extension 334. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe for more content like this from CyberData.